Hello and welcome to the March wrap-up. We are here today, or you are there then in the future, to talk about all of the books that I read in March, but we're going to be doing something radical, and I'm going to be filming all of my reactions to the books basically as soon as I finish them, because I feel like in a wrap-up by the end of the month, I forget what I wanted to say, and so now you'll get a chance to see more of my in the moment feelings about everything. So I just finished today, mere hours ago, Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. Oh, I should move over. Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. And I'm giving it 5 stars. It's probably, I went through my spreadsheet to try to figure out if this is true. I think it's the best thriller I've ever read. It's so good. It gives off very Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen vibes, just that dual perspective of two women being complicated and having secrets and all that good stuff. I absolutely loved it. I know some people feel a little divisive about it, but it's absolutely incredible. I have a whole video about it. You can go check that out. Haven't filmed it yet, but I'm sure it's going to be amazing. What could go wrong? But yeah, I cannot recommend this one highly enough. I'm struggling with saying something that I heard before reading this book that, is it a spoiler? Let me go check the Goodreads. Because if it's in like the book's description, then I think technically that can't be a spoiler. Let me go check. Okay, so the Goodreads description doesn't say this, but I'm gonna say it. I'll put a spoiler thing up and you can come back when it's done. Just because I think knowing it might affect your enjoyment of it. Is this something you really enjoy or really don't enjoy in thrillers? So, spoiler. Very mild spoiler also. I'm not giving away any twists or anything. But there is a speculative element to this. A sci-fi, fantasy, something is vaguely not normal. Vaguely magic-y. Vaguely. Oh, it's so hard to describe. What I heard is there is a speculative element to this. And that's all I'm gonna say. And I think that ruined it for a lot of people who only like realistic fiction. But I absolutely loved it. I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed. That's the first book. It's March 4th today, so I'm hopefully gonna be seeing you many more times this month. Good luck, me. Someone is dying of hunger, literally wasting away. He's trying to be cute, so I'll feed him. It's not time yet. In a minute. I'm back again and I have a 2-for-1 deal for you today. Today I finished both No Time Like the Future by Michael J. Fox, and I guess I should reassemble this. One moment. It's embarrassing. And the Decameron project compiled by the New York Times. 29 new stories from the pandemic. Let's talk not about this. No Time Like the Future was a 3-star for me. It took me a long time to get into because I read the audiobook and Michael J. Fox narrates it, and with his advancing Parkinson's, one of the symptoms is less clear speech. His pronunciation isn't as good and words sort of get a little garbled, so it is really hard to understand at the beginning. I got used to it eventually, but I was listening to it just at straight speed, which I never do. And there were things that I liked about it. I think part of the problem was, so it's subtitled An Optimist Considers Mortality, and that really wasn't what it was about. It was mostly about his more recent health struggles, which were interesting, but not really what I wanted going into it. It also felt like because this was his 3rd book, there were a lot of things that maybe had already been discussed in previous books and he didn't want to repeat himself. So I feel like maybe those would have had more information that I would have cared about. I don't know. There was nothing wrong with it. 3 stars is still good. I still learned some interesting stuff, but yeah, not really something I'll be coming back to. The Decameron project is also 3 stars. Rating short story collections is always hard because there's 29 authors. I think there's actually 36 contributors because a number of the works in here are translated. Like any short story collection, there were some real winners and there were some real losers. My favorite stories in here were the ones by Mona Awad had a great one. Tommy Orange, I like that one. Margaret Atwood and River Solomon. The problem for me with this was that it was mostly just straight fiction. And even in some cases, I don't really think it was fiction. It read more like memoir stuff from the author's POV. And I think with short stories, for me, I need a shtick. I need something to grab me and get in, explain your concept and get out. Because you can't really build on the characters, so I don't care about them. I found a lot of the stories in here just kind of boring. The other interesting thing about this was, so the book came out in November 2020, but the original New York Times article came out in July, which means it was probably compiled in June, which is only really 3 months into when the US, where this is published, was really being hit. There are some international authors in here too, though. But that means that this was still like pre-George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, which I think really would have helped it to go more political. This is mostly just authors sitting at home being boring. Some of the stories do expand on it a bit more, but I feel like it didn't do enough interesting stuff. The ones that I liked were all, except for the Tommy Orange one, something genre-y to get me into them. And I really liked that. But for the most part, a lot of these stories were really dull. This is also just available online, not in book format, if you're interested in checking out some of them, ones that interest you. The one that I was really excited about in here, there's a story in here called A Time of Death, The Death of Time, which is the perfect summation of a pandemic. But that one was just kind of middling. There was nothing wrong with it. It just kind of happened to me. Definitely some 5-star stories in there, but overall, eh. The next book that I read in March was 99% Mine by Sally Thorne. This was something that was forced onto me by a friend of mine, even though I think it was originally my idea. Anyway, 99% Mine was bad. It was not a good time. I did not enjoy the hating game, but I know that people who enjoyed the hating game hated 99% Mine, and I was hoping to maybe do a switcheroo. Maybe there was something in it that was different from the hating game that I would enjoy. No, this is just the hating game turned up to 11. It's awful. It has the worst relationship ever. They're so possessive and inappropriate and harassy. Awful. Just awful, awful people. Both of them together, they are somehow even worse. The nicest thing I can say is that at one point I considered giving this 2 stars, but then I didn't, and I gave it 1 star. Do not recommend. Maybe if you're in the mood for a hate read, but then I would recommend the hating game, because the hating game was fun and horrible people and a bad relationship that I couldn't root for. This was a bad relationship that I couldn't root for and no fun. Maybe the next one will be better. Let's cut to that. The next book that I finished was My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. This book was so much fun. This has been on my TBR forever, and it did not disappoint right from the get-go. It's really smart and really interesting, and like the intrigue is really well done, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It was really weird to read a domestic thriller from the POV of a male. The last exclusively male POV I think was like The Silent Patient, and even that had little inserts from the girl. Alicia? That sounds right. It's definitely Alicia. I was loving this book so much for so much of it, and I was trying to figure out like why wasn't I getting the same vibes that I got from Behind Her Eyes. They were both highly anticipated thrillers that were going really well, and I was trying to figure out why I didn't have that sort of 5-star feeling. And then it ramped up and then it ramped down. The ending sort of fizzled out. It was good, it just felt like the action kind of stopped. It became very stagnant, and I understand why. Like, the story did call for that. It made sense for the characters to do. It was just kind of, it took the wind out of my sails, and that was too bad because it was shaping up to be a 5-star read. I'm ending up giving this one a 4. I feel bad about it. If I was the kind of person who did points, it would be like a 4.25 because so much of it was so good. And I'm so excited for Samantha Downing's new release coming out. I was already excited before I'd read anything that she'd written. I feel like I'm talking myself into a 5-star, but I'm gonna stick with my gut. It's a 4. Don't question me. Don't look at my Goodreads in case it's changed. No, it's a 4-star because some of the stuff that got revealed at the end I thought was dumb. Not super dumb, but like it didn't live up to what it had set up in the first half, which is so annoying. The next book that I finished was Hench by Natalie, Zina, Walschots. I feel like I say it different every time. I'm very sorry. This was a book that I was very excited about. I think I included it in my 5-star predictions. About a woman who does administrative work for superheroes and supervillains. Unfortunately, I think I'm gonna end up giving it a 2-star, which is so disappointing because the first 10% was my perfect book. A lot of the time I don't like satire, but I feel like this was satire done perfectly in the beginning. And the world building was all great, very tongue-in-cheek. Interesting side characters getting introduced. After that, the main character has a run-in with a superhero and gets injured. Then the whole book takes a totally different course after that, and it becomes much slower and not fun. So much of this book is spent, she gets hurt and then she's in recovery and then she has to have like a medical procedure and then she has to like learn how to walk again. It just plodded along so much. It was so frustrating. So it was like a 3-star, but then the ending happened. I didn't mind the ending because it was like ridiculous or anything. It was just so long-winded. You could have done this story in a way shorter amount of time. It felt very cyclical, like we would do something, it would work or it would fail and we would have to do it again. There were also so many side characters introduced that you then just never heard from again, or even the sheer volume of them, you couldn't really keep track of who was who. And also this book, it only has 8 chapters, which is, first of all, just kind of weird. And second of all, each chapter felt so different from the one previously. The narrative wouldn't continue. It was like you were being dropped into a new episode. Maybe that's what they were going for. It was like 8 comics in one, but it wasn't good and it wasn't clear and it wasn't fun, which is so upsetting because like it was there. The setup was all there. It was gonna be great. So this is a 2-star read from me. I'm very sad about it. It took me a really long time to read because I kept literally falling asleep. I think this book is responsible for 2 naps, which I'm not mad at. I love a nap book, but I'm happy that this one is over. The next book that I finished was The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. This is another thriller. And I thought it was really good. I thought it was very different from the more domestic stuff that I normally read while still being pretty close. There are multiple POVs in this, switching throughout the narrative. Eventually one of them is a cop, and I don't normally love cop-led mysteries, but he was in it just enough that it was interesting. I did this one on audiobook and I would highly recommend it that way. It was a simple enough plot that it was reasonable to do on audio, and it had multiple POVs, but all of the narrators were all very distinct, and I really like that, except for one of the narrators kept pronouncing her W's with H's at the front, like while and whistle and when, and wow, she said it a lot, and I noticed every single time. Other than that, she did fine. It was just, and sometimes she would pronounce it normally, which I don't understand. I'm struggling with this one because I can't find anything wrong with it that's immediately not true. The thing that is wrong with it is it's written by a man, and you can tell because everything is weirdly sexual. I don't know if other people notice this. There's a very specific thing that happens when a man writes a book like this and everything is just sort of sexual for no reason. It didn't really affect my enjoyment of it. It was more just every time it happened I would notice and like think, why is this happening? There was a lot about it that I really liked. I think my favorite part of it would have been Lily's backstory and I kind of wish we had more of that, but I understand why. I'm struggling with, like, there's nothing technically wrong with this book, but I didn't get that 5-star feeling. I would highly recommend it though. It feels like a very safe thriller, like something that could get you into them if you're not really used to reading them. Also recommend it to your dad. It feels very dad book. And I think it had just the right number of twists and turns to not feel over the top. This one definitely didn't feel action-packed. It felt very slow. Well, not slow. There was always stuff happening. It just wasn't like high octane, like a lot of the thrillers that I read. Still very happy with it. I just wish I had a reason I wasn't giving it 5 stars. I do think it was, I was gonna say it was better than My Lovely Wife, but there were some things in My Lovely Wife that I really loved. I think this was definitely more solid overall. It felt very cohesive, really good read, just didn't quite have that 5-star feeling. So 4 stars, we're gonna call it at that, and we're gonna move on. That's a good look. We'll make it work. The next book that I finished was The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. This is my 4th thriller of the month. Like, I literally just finished it maybe 15 minutes ago, so I feel like I'm still kind of reeling from the ending a little bit. It definitely was too long. I'm getting distracted because I thought the ending was probably the strongest part of the whole book. I thought that the opening was fine. We get introduced to our main character, Emma, who is an artist, and we are at like a gallery opening, but then that very quickly falls away and like isn't really part of the plot very much. It also opens with second-person narration, which is very strange. I still don't know what the purpose of that was. It felt more just like, I know how to write in second person, why not? It didn't really add anything. And I think the middle was too long. It was also just full of women's names. The majority of this takes place at an all-girls summer camp. It's nothing but white girl names. You got your Crystal, your Vivian, your Allison or Addison, I don't remember, Miranda, Franny. It was just constant, and you really had no idea who was who. And also, if you've got dual timelines, and some people are in both timelines but some people aren't, so that was very confusing. I also did this one on audiobook. I think the narrator was great for it, but I don't recommend it for audio just because I think it's a bit too confusing for that. I feel like a lot of this book just kind of happened and I wasn't super engaged with it for most of the time. There were definitely bits that were strong, but more intermingled among just like boring camp life in general. I was also worried that the ending wasn't going to address something that like I had latched on to earlier in the book, and I was like, you need to explain that. And they almost didn't explain it, but then right there at the end they explained it, so now I'm happy. I feel like I'm riding the high of it a little bit because basically the whole time I was reading it, I was like, it's a 3. Unless the ending can do something to totally blow me away, it's a 3. And I still think it's a 3. It was a good book for letting you figure out some stuff and not letting you figure out other stuff, so you get the satisfaction of being right, but not being spoiled. I did also listen to this audiobook while I was playing Bowser's Fury, and I beat it, and so maybe I'm a little bit biased because it's a very fun game, but I had a good time, and isn't that what is important? Excuse the wet hair. I just got out of the shower because I needed a cold one after finishing Romancing the Duke by Tessa Dare. I didn't really, I finished it last night, but I thought it was a good joke. This was maybe the steamiest book I've ever read. Just the sheer volume of sex scenes and the intensity of them. It was a lot, but I ended up really enjoying this book. It was so unexpected because of the sort of style that it has. So it's supposed to be historical romance from the cover, but it reads very modern, and it has a lot of sort of tongue-in-cheek references to modern day things. Like there's some cosplayers in there. There's a very blatant Star Wars joke. There's a bit of dialogue where she like comes in with a comeback that she's been working on for 3 days. It's like meme humor. It's a very strange, but somehow it really works and it's really charming unexpectedly. I thought the characters in this were really fun. The heroine was great, like sort of just there to be a romantic interest, but she did have some stuff of her own, but mostly she was just really into the main guy, whose name was Ransom. Not a good thing. If you were thinking Ransom is a great name, it's not. And he's just such a stereotypical jaded bad boy with a dark past but secretly a heart of gold. But in a way that I didn't mind, which was very refreshing. The only thing I will say, the reason that this is getting 4 stars and not 5 stars is because the romancy stuff sort of got a little iffy at some point. Never outright assault or anything like that. Far more mild than the hating game, which I will never shut up about how much I hate it. But there were a lot of times where he was like trying to get the heroine to leave him alone because they hate each other at the start. And he keeps being like, if you keep hanging around, I'm gonna do what bad boys like me do, implying he's gonna rape her, which is not great, but the book doesn't really explore that because the heroine's super into it the whole time. Still made me uncomfortable while reading it, and the book didn't really acknowledge how gross that was. I wish that part wasn't in there, but I'm so happy with the rest of what we got. I hesitate to even call this a historical romance. It was like a modern romance plus castles and corsets, which sounds great. Very down for that. But none of the language was older or anything like that. It was just a fun, steamy romance, and I really enjoyed it. I think I'm gonna have time for one more book this month, so if I get cut off here, the final book that I finished in March was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I did it, I get it, I know what the hype's about, I'm in with the cool kids now, I feel very accomplished. And it did not disappoint. It was so good. It was totally worth the hype. I feel like this book sort of subverted what I love in books. Like, I'm very much a plot-driven person, but this one I cared less so about the plot and more about the characters and the settings. I think the 4 different Londons were sort of treated like characters, and so they were very well fleshed out in my brain. Red London is the floating city from Raya and the Last Dragon. I think it's Talon. The visuals in it were very red as well and vaguely magical. I think that's why I think of it. White London is obviously Narnia, and Tilda Swinton could play both king and queen there. Excellent. I'm struggling with what to rate this one because I didn't really have any problems with it other than that it was fantasy, and I'm not generally a big fantasy reader. Like, there's a bunch of elemental magic that I don't care about. I thought the magic both had too many rules and not enough rules. There's no winning there. That's a me problem, and I don't want that to reflect in my rating of the book, but also, like, it's my rating. I don't know. It's either a 4 or a 5. I'm very happy I read it. I wish I had more to say, but my brain, no work good. Since this is the last book I'm going to read this month, I'm just going to do the quick recap right now. I read 10 books this month, which is really good for me. I read every star rating you could possibly read this month from a 1 to a 5. It's very exciting, and I feel like it was a very good reading month overall. I am very pleased with my reading. I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!